All right, and good evening to you across the Sunshine State. It is time for the Drive the State show. 1 hour of looking at the latest playoff rankings and the playoff brackets. What would they look like right now as we head into week 7 here? Tonight's the slate of 3 shows, the Drive the State show. The Gulf Coast splits tonight. Usually we're there Monday nights, but we'll have that tonight instead, as a lot of teams in the Gulf Coast played last night, so we'll recap that. And then, of course, we got the North Florida Blitz as well. So the Gulf Coast Blitz at 7:30, North Florida Blitz at 8:30 Eastern time. And, of course, as you're watching right now, the Drive the State show right here, 6 till 7, maybe a little over past 7, but we'll go over through the next hour, the 8 classifications with the playoffs and what the rankings look like and how things would look like in each of those 8 classifications in the playoff brackets if the playoffs were to start today. But as we know, the playoffs are not starting today. Thankfully, we got everybody. We managed to get through in terms of Hurricane Helene. I know a lot of things kind of got scattered around over the last few days, but a lot from what the games were that were played for week 6 that were made up last night, and of course through games played Saturday, Friday. There's some games being made up tonight as well, but those have not will not be counted into those playoff rankings until after next week. So once we get next Tuesday, when the rankings come again from the Florida High School Athletic Association, you'll see those games counted in. Good evening to everybody, and appreciate everybody joining us here on the show here. And if you got any comments or questions, just pop those up right there in the comments or questions in your box that you got, wherever you're watching this at. That'd be Facebook, YouTube, or X/Twitter. Of course, we're on social media at Florida HS Football, except for X Twitter. That is the FLAHS Football. But with that said, we will get things rolling here. And actually, we got a comment here from Emery William-Smith joins us here. And he says, "Hi, Josh. I'm glad many of us will be able to return to high school football this week, but several teams in the hardest hit places are not returning this week, and I'll keep them in my prayers as they recover from the aftermath of the hurricane." And Emery, good to see you here on. And yes, there's definitely a couple of programs in need, and we'll share those more on our shows coming up here tonight. But Taylor County, as I've already mentioned that last night, they're in need of some of various items. And if y'all need that information, just let me know, and I'll put that in the comment box here as we go through the shows here tonight. And Ben Casanova, he's already sitting here ready to see what Lakeland's up to. And I think you pretty much know where Lakeland is up to, what they're really ready for and all that. So we'll get through that here coming up in the next little bit. But as we get started here and we roll along to this, we're going to roll into starting with the first bracket, and that the first classification, I should say, and that is Class Rural. Yes, we will get started here with Class Rural as we roll along in here. And as you can see here, Class Rural Division A bracket, if you look at it very closely here as we roll into this here, Union now the number 1 seed as we roll into this one. Union County bumps up a spot. Jay and Union County flip. So Jay now at 2 seed after the Jay Royals took on their first loss here Friday night. And as we get looking at the bracket here, as I made a couple adjustments, I talked to Scott Jamison of the FHSAA. Things with the way the rural bracket's going to work, as in what is the Class Rural what the Division A bracket is going to look like and what the Division B bracket's going to look like. There's going to be some flexibility. There's going to be things aren't totally set in stone how that's going to look like, but right now there's 34 teams in the rural classification. There's a potential chance a couple teams in that may not finish their seasons just because they've had some issues with the numbers. And but that's the teams. Usually the teams that are having the trouble are going to be in that Division B bracket, not the Division A. But right this second, what I'm looking at potentially could see this happen is that the top 18 teams end up in the Division A bracket, meaning that there'll be a play-in game for between the fit number 16 and 17 teams, which is Moorhaven and Marathon, and the number 15 and 18 teams, which is Baker and Lafayette. And right now, looking at this here, Madison County holding steady at 3. Hawthorne bumps up 2 spots to be at number 4, and the Hornets still 4-1, didn't play last past week, but as we roll along here, you can see that there are still quite a few teams undefeated here in the rural classification. Franklin County, Osceola Christian, Cottondale, all 5-0. Chiefland 5-0 as well. The biggest movers that we saw in Class World this week was Pahokee moving up 4 spots, Williston moving up 4 spots after that win over against Trinity Catholic last night, which nabbed Robbie Pruitt his 400th win. And then we're looking at also the biggest fall was Cottondale. Cottondale didn't play, but they fell 3 spots here. And Blountstown, which you'll see coming up here in a minute, they fell 6 spots. Yes, Blountstown went from being in the Division A bracket to being in the Division B bracket. So, again, here's a look at that Division A bracket, what it would look like right now. And it's a true seeding, as you can see, 1, 16, 17. So whoever wins that would say win the proverbial 16-17 game, Moorhaven Marathon. They would play the 1 seed, which right now currently is sitting there is Union County. But you can tell it's a true seeding, meaning that some travel will be in order if this happens with the playoff brackets as we roll along. Now, here is what the Division B. Oh, now, okay. Didn't want to click. I didn't have it clicked right. There we go. All right. Here's what the Division B bracket. So, Blountstown falling 6 spots actually puts them in the 1 seed spot in that Division B bracket with number 2 seed Branford sitting there as well, and Port St. Joe number 3. But Branford moved up 2 spots in the ranking. So Branford, Blountstown, those are the first 2 teams I would say that are out from being in that Division A bracket versus that Division B bracket. And of course, the last 2 teams we would see sitting here is in that Division B bracket, Central out of Milton and Hilliard. Those are the 2 teams that are sitting there that are at the very bottom. But again, this idea of the Division A, Division B bracket, if this works for the world classification over the next 2 years, this is something that you could see coming along for every other classification in the state. So keep an eye on this, and we'll see what happens as we roll along here. So, all right. So again, that's your world classification brackets here. As we look at that again, 2 division brackets. And right now, as we go, I'm going to flip it back over to the Division A bracket. So that way, in case anybody didn't see that Division A bracket, you can tell here, you got the 16 best teams plus a couple more sitting there that would look at potential play-in games. But right now, the best of the best sitting there in the world that would be playing in that Division A bracket as we roll along here. All right. As we roll on to our class, we're going to roll into Class 1A, Region 1. Yes, indeed. And not too many changes here in Class 1A, Region 1 this week. Pretty much the only spots that flip-flopped were Trinity Christian and McClade. They flipped the number 2 and 3 seeds here compared to last week. Your first 2 teams that are out in terms of the teams in Region 1 is Trinity Catholic and North Florida Christian. North Florida Christian wasn't even somewhere in the top 10 in their region, but they are now Trinity Catholic 1 and 5, but they're sitting there as that first team out. North Florida Christian, that second team out of the next 2 out that we've got here. But again, no significant changes in terms of what the 1A Region 1 bracket would look like right now if the playoffs were to start today. All right, as we roll along here in terms of what we got next, in terms of the playoff brackets here, we've got Region 2 in Class 1A, and really no significant, not too many changes here either. Melbourne Central Catholic jumps up 2 spots from the 5 seed to the 3 seed, while Lakeland Christian falls back 2 spots to that from the 3 seed to the 5 seed. So those were the 2 biggest changes. And Carrollwood Day, who wasn't even in the top 10 last week, they're sitting there holding that number 8 seed. Would be a game against the First Academy, a really good First Academy team right now. And as we look at that bracket, but right now there's just about a 2-point differential between First Academy and Clearwater Central Catholic. So it is there will be a battle for that 1 seed in Region 2 in Class 1A. And looking at it here as we roll along into Region 3 here. And looking at Region 3 as we roll along into this one, Cardinal Newman. This one is where there's been a lot of shuffling because there's not necessarily the change out of the teams that are in this Region 3 bracket here this week, but is in terms of who is seeded where this week. And Cardinal Newman moves up a spot while First Baptist slides down to the number 2 seed. Southwest Florida Christian up a spot to number 3, while St. John Newman falls back a spot Benjamin Community School both raise a spot. St. Petersburg Catholic slides back 2. Evangelical Christian still home at 8 seed, and that only team. There's 9 teams in that region. And as we look at it, Northside Christian is the team that is left out right now. They're the 9 teams. They're the last team out right this second in Region 3. But that 8 side, and really, honestly, there's not much difference between Evangelical Christian and Northside Christian in terms of the numbers here. Minus 2.134 to minus 2.153. So, yes, and I'm going to bring that in because Emory Smith brings up a good question here. And so Lakeland Christian lost to Carrollwood Day 31-17, but are still ranked ahead of them. Yes, that is interesting, and I'm glad that you bring that to that point there. I'll flip it back over to Region 2 here, where that is at here, Emory. And yes, Carrollwood Day is still ranked lower than Lakeland Christian, but as we see that Carrollwood Day is going to have to play Victory Christian. So if Carrollwood Day beats Victory Christian, I'm assuming that will shift a lot of things up in terms of the numbers for the playoffs there for both of those teams. So we'll see what happens in the coming weeks ahead as we get ready for week 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We only have 5 weeks of football left, people, in the regular season. It's hard to believe the season's going by too quick, too fast. All right. Looking at Region 4 in Class 1A, again, no significant changes that we have seen here too much here, except that there's been some trade-off between the 4 and 7 seeds. Chaminade Madonna still sitting at 1, Archbishop Carroll 2, Miami Edison 3, no changes there. But St. Andrews rises a spot, St. John Paul II falls a spot, but Somerset Prep, this is the biggest one. Somerset Prep, they were in the next 2 out, and this week they are jumped up to the 7th seed. While Somerset Academy Q, who was in the playoff bracket last week, sitting there at that number 6 spot, they fell 3 spots. Now they're in the next 2 out. So that is what we've got sitting there in terms of Class 1A, Region 4 in the playoffs as we roll along here. All right. As we move this along here, we're going to go into Class 2A, and the biggest changes we got sitting here in Class 2A Region 1 this week is that we see Gadsden County rise up to the number 1 spot, while Pensacola Catholic rises up 2 spots after beating Freeport. But Taylor County, who did not get to play this past week, I don't know if there was a scheduled off week or not. I want to say that let me go. I can take a look real quick, but I want to say it may have been a potential scheduled off week for Taylor County. But if they were scheduled to play this past week, which I think they were supposed to play Florida High, I think that's getting rescheduled here if that's the case. But don't quote me on that. But Taylor County falling 3 spots despite the fact not playing here this past week. And then I'm looking at a couple of the other spots that we saw here. Baldwin moves up a spot despite the fact they lost to Bowles last night. And then, of course, Bozeman, they fall a spot. So Baldwin and Bozeman are the first 2 teams out in Class 2A Region 1, but no other significant changes, new teams coming in the mix of the rankings right now. All right, as we roll along here in the Class 2A Region 2, we've got Bradford still sitting there at number 1, and Billy Rayberg joined, I think, Bradford County. Yes, Bradford, he says go Tornadoes. And then, yes, Bradford County, I believe is going to be playing, I want to say they're playing Palaca this coming week here, but Newberry's next week. That's going to be the big game there in that district. And as you see here, Newberry jumps up a spot to number 3 after beating Palaca last night, shutting the Palaca in the Battle of the Panthers, I should say. Palaca Panthers versus Newberry Panthers. The Palaca Panthers were victorious. And there you go, right there. So Newberry jumps up a spot. Palaca slides back a spot. But the biggest mover here this week in this region was Calvary Christian Clearwater, moving up 2 spots from 7 to number 5 after beating Berkeley Prep, which sent Berkeley Prep down to the 6th seed. And how about this? Lake Placid still ranked 11th overall in the region, but would be the 8th seed because they would be the best team in Class 2A, District 7 right now. So Lake Placid, not the really, because the next 2 best teams because technically number 18 would be Astronaut, but Astronaut would be the first team out because of Lake Placid. So, yes, Michael Reno chimes in and says he's torn between the two, and I know which two teams he's torn between the two, and that would be Bradford and Newberry, so I can tell you that right now. And Emery Williams-Smith said that would be a long trip up to Bradford Lake Placid if that ended up happening, and there's a very good chance that could end up happening, Emery, so we'll keep an eye on that and see if that ends up coming true for Lake Placid here as we roll along. All right, so that's a look at 2A Region 2. We're going to roll along here into Class 2A Region 3, and Cardinal Mooney and Lakewood, those two are playing tonight in their makeup game, district game for those two programs, and they are playing tonight, so not anything factoring from Week 6 action in the rankings here, but Cardinal Mooney still holding a number 1 seed right to second in this region. But here are the biggest movers this week. Bishop Verot up 2 spots. Kings Academy up 2 spots. So changing a little bit of what this region looks like in Class 2A Region 3, as we got now a potential matchup with Glade Central and Tarpon Springs in that 4-5 spot, because Glade Central fell a spot, but Tarpon Springs raised a spot as well. Now Calvary Christian Fort Lauderdale, they fell 4 spots after losing to Cardinal Gibbons this past week. So that right there, a 1-point loss sends you down 4 spots. This is why you play the game on the field, but the computer rankings take note of this. And so Calvary Christian falling 4 spots this past week here. All right. Looking at the rest of it, you got Lakewood still sitting at 7, Somerset Canyon still sitting at 8. Inland Grove and Clewiston are still the next 2 teams out in the region. Nothing changed there in terms of the 2 teams that are out right now here this week. And as we roll into Region 4, we've got Booker T. Washington sitting out there at number 1 seed. They traded spaces with Immaculate LaSalle. So the flip-flop of those 2 spots, 1-2 seeds there in Region 4 in Class 2A. Ransom Everglades holds now. Cardinal Gibbons does move up a spot because of that victory over Calvary Christian. So now they are sitting at the 4 spot versus the 5 spot. So they Cardinal Gibbons and Monsignor Pace traded spaces here, and with that 4 or 5 spot, Miami Carroll City up a spot, Miami Springs down a spot, and then Somerset Silver Palms. They would actually be the 9th rated team in that region, but because they are the best team sitting right now, sitting in Class 2A District 16, they would be the first team in. Of course, remember, a district champion will be guaranteed a spot among the 8 teams in the playoffs. So if they're ranked like 9th, 10th, 11th, somewhere in that stretch, but they won their district, they will supersede a team that is sitting there technically ranked number 8, bumping that team out, which we could see here happening once again this year with the playoffs. All right, that is a look at Class 2A Region 4. All right, so we're going to go in the Class 3A, and once we do Class 3A, we're going to take a water break, and we'll come back, and then we'll do what we'll do is after we do Class 3A, we'll take water break, and then we'll come back. We'll look at Classes 4, 5, 6, and 7 in the A classifications, as some people will call them. All right, we're going to roll along here in terms of Class 3A Region 1. All right, here is a look at what we got here for Class 3A Region 1. Nothing changes here with Rain still sitting at top. Baker County, their game against Godby was postponed here. So they will be playing Godby this week, Thursday night, instead of playing Ponte Vedra. So Baker County, Ponte Vedra was supposed to make up their game this past week, a couple weeks ago this week, and that's not happening now because Godby needed to reschedule with Baker County due to Hurricane Helene. So that'll be a Thursday night game out in Tallahassee for a critical district game between the Wildcats and the Cougars. Wakulla moves up a spot. Godby does move up a spot. The FHA has got Godby listed as 4-2. The problem is that there's a preseason game that's potentially being factored into the rankings. So Godby's ranking may be skewed just a little bit. I have notified the FHA about this potential problem, so I have not gotten a response back yet, but I will let y'all know once I hear something regarding that coming up later on, potentially maybe the next show next week, if that's being taken care of. Bishop Kenny falls 2 spots this week, so instead of Bishop Kenny potentially being a home team during the playoffs, they are now falling to the 5 seed, potentially putting them on the road. And the Yulee, how about Yulee, number 8 now this week, and they were nowhere to be found in the top 10. And but now Swanee is sitting there at number still sitting there, the first team out. Terry Parker now rises as the next team sitting out in the number 10 spot this week in Class 3A Region 1. All right, looking at 3A Region 2 coming up here. O'Galley jumps to the number 1 spot after moving to 6-0 with their 7-3 victory over Titusville. How about Bishop Moore? Bishop Moore falling a spot there. They were the number 1 seed last week. That loss to Titan Thomas Aquinas did impact them some, but not too terribly much, but enough that it slid them down behind O'Galley. And but Bishop Moore now 4-1 on the season. Dunellen still sitting there at the 3 spot. Mount Dora 4. Merritt Island and Titusville both rise a spot, despite the fact that Titusville's 2-3. Titusville did rise a spot, and North Marion fell 2 spots. Now, what's interesting is, yes, North Marion is still in this, but South Sumter, who beat North Marion, is the 9th team out right this second. And here's the thing: South Sumter actually would be ranked as ranked number 8 in this region. But the interesting thing is that Crystal River would supersede them because they have the best team in Class 3A District 7. And if that keeps holding and they win the district, and but they end up being outside the top 8, Crystal River would supersede South Sumter and leave South Sumter out of the playoffs. But again, we still got some games ahead. And well, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Reno. I mean, because South Sumter beat North Marion this past week. So the biggest thing is that North Marion still has got to play Dunellen, and they still got to play Eastside in the district. So I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen. Dunellen and Eastside are making up their game Thursday night. So there'll be some interesting shuffles there with the rankings here. But if Dunellen has their way with North Marion, or like how South Sumter is, I would eventually see South Sumter jumping in, whereas North Marion will eventually be out of the rankings here. Come in the next couple of weeks, my opinion there. All right. But that is a look at Class 3A Region 2. Let's roll into Class 3A Region 3 here. Mulberry takes over the top seed in this region. And I told Emery Smith that we would talk about this because this is probably one of the weakest regions of all the regions in any classification in the state. And I was talking to him before the show about this just briefly. Mulberry sitting there at 5-0. Beating Hardy last night 24-0, and then you got Jefferson who moved the 6-0. They slid a spot, so now they're in the 2 seed. Hudson, the biggest mover this week, moving up 2 spots from 9 to 7. So now Hudson's in the top 8 here, looking at a playoff spot. And of course, Hardy slides back a spot to the number 8 seed. And but Robinson and Dunedin are your next 2 out. And as you can see here, Booker 3, Nature Coast 4, they hold their spots. Boca Ciega and Chamberlain swap spots this week. And so Boca Ciega number 5, Chamberlain 6. But Hudson, the biggest mover this week in Region 3. And I'm gonna pop this comment up here. But Emery Smith said after watching Hardy play last night, I don't think we look like a playoff team, but yes. He this is what we were talking about. He swears the region's weak, and I have to agree with you, Emery. This region is pretty much it's really weak, and there's going to be a team there's a chance that there's probably potentially 1 or 2 teams that will be sub 500 coming into the playoffs here in this region come in November. All right, as we go into our last region in Class 3A. We got Miami Central still sitting there at number 1. Miami Northwestern 2, no changes there. But Key West, the biggest mover up this week, moving up 2 spots from 5 to 3. So the Key West Conks, all the way down in the southernmost point of the United States, looking at a potential home game in the playoffs if things hold. But here's the thing to note: they are in 3A District 16, which includes Miami Northwestern and Miami Jackson. So things are very much fluid here. So I don't want to get the hopes up of the Conks just yet that you may have a potential home playoff game here, but we'll see what happens here as we roll along here. And of course, we've got St. Brendan, who's number 8 seed. They were the biggest faller this week, minus 5 spots. They fell to 8. But as it stands right now, every single team in District 3A 16 would be in the playoffs based upon this with the rankings here. So it is really, really interesting. Cypress Lake moves up a spot. Aubrey Rogers is now the new school in Naples that just opened up soon. That's just opened up last year, actually 2 years ago, I want to say. It's been the last couple of years here. Aubrey Rogers, one of the newer programs into Sunshine State. They are now sitting, potentially looking at a playoff berth. They're sitting there at number 10 in Class 3A Region 4 as part of the next two teams out. So, yes. And Steven Fatch chimes in, the Conks, one of the best team names in the state. I know, I agree with you. That is one of the most unique mascots anywhere. Not just in Florida, but I also feel like it's in one of the most unique team mascots anywhere in the nation. So I would love for anybody to challenge me on that, but the Conks, that it's just really, really a cool mascot. And yes, part of the Conch Republic down there in Key West and then Florida Keys. But as we go to do this, we're going to get it ready for a water break here. If you got any questions, comments, thoughts, well, just put that in the box. We can put in the comment box, whether you're watching us on Facebook, X/Twitter, or on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube at Florida HS Football. We're getting closer to 1,000 subscribers, so we would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to us and click that notification bell to get updates when we go live and all that. But as we roll along here, we're going to take a 2-minute water break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do classes 4A, 5A, 6A, and 7A. You're watching the Drive the State show right here on FortHSFootball.com and the FortHSFootball.com social media platforms. We'll be right back right after this. All right, hey, welcome back here to the Drive the State show here on FortHSFootball.com and on the FortHSFootball.com social media platforms. And again, if you're not following us on social media, hit follow us. Follow us wherever your favorite social media platform is at Florida HS Football, except on X/Twitter. That is at FLAHS Football. And we definitely appreciate everybody watching here tonight as we come to you live. Looking at the FHA playoff rankings. Yes, we are taking a look at those rankings. We've already done Class Rural 1A, 2A, and 3A. And as we get ready to do Class 4A coming up here in just a moment, we will take a look at what's happening and as we're going up, we're going into the bigger schools. Yes, we are as we roll along here. All right, with that said, we're going to go into Class 4A Region 1. And looking at it, we got St. Augustine still sitting there at that number 1 seed. Yes, St. Augustine still a number 1 seed, getting that win over Columbia last week, and now 4-1 on the season. Choctaw Rickard stood for still 2 and 3 seeds. Nothing changed there from last week, but Escambia, the biggest mover this week in the region, going from the 8 seed to the 4 seed. Yes, the Escambia Gators now looking like a 4 seed right this second, would be hosting a number 5 seed in Riverside, who actually bumped up a spot from 6 to 5. And so is Pine Forest up now from 7 to 6. The biggest fallers this week, Ed White down 3 spots and Arnold down 3 spots. And the first 2 teams out in that region right now are Columbia, they're out there in Lake City, and Pensacola, Booker T, Washington. So those are your first 2 teams out sitting there in Class 4A Region 1. All right, going into 4A Region 2, Jones, who is 6-0 after thumping Auburndale this past weekend. So they are still sitting here holding that number 1 seed. No real big changes in this region this week. The only changes were Zephyr Hills and Rockledge swapping the number 5 and number 6 seed. So now Zephyr Hills 5, Rockledge 6. Nothing else has really changed here in Class 4A Region 2. So looking at a potential Lecanto Zephyr Hills matchup in that 4-5 spot, while we look at a Lake Wells Rockledge matchup in that 3-6 spot there in Class 4A Region 2. All right, as we roll along here in terms of Class 4A, Port Charlotte moves up to the number 1 seed here. Yes, I mean, how about this? Port Charlotte moves up to the number 1 seed here this week. After what happened with Dunbar. Dunbar fell 2 spots to number 3 from number 1, and Naples rises up from 4 to 2 after Naples getting that big 21-20 victory over Dunbar in overtime on Friday night. So Port Charlotte reaps the rewards on this one here right this second. But it is really interesting in terms of what District 4A-12 is like, because you've got 4 teams in there, and the top 3 teams are all from that district: Port Charlotte, Naples, and Dunbar. South Fort Myers is actually one of the first 2 teams out, and they are in that district right this second. So South Fort Myers, number 9, and Hillsborough 10. Now, a couple other interesting changes. River Ridge falls a spot, but they are 6-0, still really in mixing the playoffs hunt here. And St. Petersburg moves up a spot, swapping a spot with Clearwater in the 5-6. Yes, the 5-6 spots now is 5 St. Petersburg, 6 Clearwater. But as you can see there in the bracket, we got some very interesting matchups potentially on the docket if this were to hold out through the remainder of the regular season. All right, Emery Smith chimes in and says Port Charlotte's been very impressive this year, 4-2 losses to a tough Venice and First Baptist teams. And by the way, hey, First Baptist, they took their first loss to Bishop Barreau on Friday night, so that helped Bishop Barreau moved up in their class, their regional rankings as well. All right, as we roll along here in terms of going to Class 4A Region 4, we see Miami Norland is now up to the number 1 seed. They were sitting there at number 3 last week, but they thumped Archbishop McCarthy Friday night to get a district victory. And American Heritage Plantation bumped up 3 spots. They were one of the biggest movers here. And yes, as you look at it right this second, if your eyes are not deceiving you, the top 4 seeds are all from the same district in this region. Yes, Miami Norland, American Heritage Plantation, Archbishop McCarthy, and Plantation, all from District 4A-15, and all 4 of them are in the top 4. There you go. But I don't expect this to hold out for the entire season. But there's that chance. I'm saying that there's a chance that the 4 teams from 4A-15 could end up being the 4 teams, the top 4 teams at the end of the season. As we can see here, it's a possibility. So, but yes, American Heritage Plantation up 3 spots, Archbishop McCarthy down 2 spots, Plantation down 2 spots. But another big riser this week, Dr. Joaquin Garcia. They were sitting there last week out of the picture. They were outside of this at the number 9 spot. This week, Dr. Garcia is now sitting at the number 5 spot with the number 5 seed, 6-0. Yes, Dr. Garcia sitting there. Second-year program. The Bulldogs potentially could be in the playoffs this year. First year in district play as well. But I will say that to not beat anything into the ground here, but Dr. Garcia's schedule, their district kind of weak, so it may be lending to that for them to get in the playoffs this year. So, but we'll see what happens. Hialeah still sitting there as the 8th seed, even though they're ranked number 9. John Carroll, by the way, who was in the rankings last week, they're actually the number 8 team, but they would be bumped out for Hialeah for the team in District 4, the best team in District 4A 16. So John Carroll, even though John Carroll's 5-0, John Carroll would be outside of the playoffs, outside of the playoff picture as of this week. So yes, I know. Again, it's the rule. The district champs, if you're a district champion, you're ranked below the number 8 spot. You bump that number 8 team in order to get into the playoffs. So that's the rule, and that's how it works. And we follow that to give you the most realistic picture for the playoffs. All right, as we roll along here in terms of the playoffs, we're going to go on into Class 5A. I know there's some of our listeners, some of our viewers been waiting for Class 5A to come up because actually I think honestly Class 5A might be the best classification in the entire state. And we're going to talk about it. How about this? Niceville still sitting there at the number 1 seed, but look who is sitting there at that number 8 seed. Yes, Daytona Beach Mainland, a defending state champion, sitting there now at the number 8 seed. They were sitting there just outside last week in the bracket. They were the number 9 team in that region last week. This week they are number 8 here in Class 5A Region 1. Now we've had some interesting changes, a couple of interesting changes here. Mosley moves up a spot, Beachside moves up a spot, Ponte Vedra falls 2 spots after falling to Fleming Island. Now Fleming Island didn't get a bump up despite the fact of that victory right there. I will say this. It really, really is interesting that Fleming Island didn't bump up despite the fact they beat Ponte Vedra. But here's the thing, District 5A3, there's still a lot of good games left coming up here over the next few weeks between teams in that district. That includes Fleming, we got districts, that district, I should say, is Fleming Island, Ponte Vedra, Beachside, Middleburg, and Orange Park. So, yes. And finally, here comes the comments here that we've got here with Emory must have been referring to District 4A15, which is that must be a very strong district with a lot of good teams in that district. Yes, so that I believe that's who he was referring to in that comment there. And Zach Lesnar, Niceville versus Mainland, the first round. Sign me up. Yeah, you know what? That would be a fun game, honestly, to see Mainland versus Niceville in that first round. Now, here's the thing. I think Mainland ends up going 5-5, so Mainland wins out here. So Mainland may not necessarily be the 8th seed. I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen here over the next few weeks. All right. So let me point this out here. So you got Niceville 5-0, Lincoln 5-0. You've got Mosley 6-0. Mosley moving up to the 3 seed this week. Then you have Middleburg, who is 6-0, but at the 6th seed. Probably of the teams that are undefeated, Middleburg has the weakest schedule, but Middleburg's having their best season since 1989. And starting off with Middleburg will have their first winning record since 2003 when they made the playoffs that year and won their first and only playoff game that year. And we'll talk more about that in the North Florida Blitz coming up here after 8:30 Eastern time tonight. Zach Lesnar says monster game between Niceville versus Mosley next week. Oh boy. It's going to be a monster game next week, and I'll tell you this: that those two teams, they're probably going to come in undefeated in that. And honestly, it's going to be someone has to take an L, unfortunately. So that's the unfortunate thing there because both teams are really having great years here so far. But 5A, I like how 5A Region 1 is setting up some really, really good teams. And Beachside, by the way, this will be their first year playoff eligibility, and they're looking like they could have a playoff spot here, sitting there right now at the number 4 seed in the region. All right. Rolling into Class 5A, Region 2. Yeah, Stephen Patch says Knightsville and then Lincoln the following week. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's going to be fun to watch this because the next few weeks are going to be really, really fun to watch, especially when we get into weeks 8, 9, and 10, the last 3 big weeks of district play. Usually that's when everything starts to really separate itself of between who are the contenders versus who are the pretenders. So we'll find out here coming up here. All right. 5A Region 2, I'm going to go back up here in terms of a couple of the comments. Ben Casanova was like Lakeland. Well, here you go, Ben. Lakeland number 1 seed still. No changes. Actually, what's nice about this one, which is relatively doesn't happen. There was no changes from last week in this region. Yes. And someone's going to tell me that, well, Lake Gibson lost 63-0 to Lakeland. Well, that didn't move him down. Actually helped him with a 63-0 loss. I swear I thought Lake Gibson was going to be out of this, but nope, not what the rankings say. And so you got Lakeland, Lake Gibson in that 1-8 spot, and of course you see as it says Tampa Bay Tech, East Bay 2-7, Gaither, Sebring 3-6, and Springstead, Edgewater 4-5. So. Again, no changes in Class 5A Region 2, but however, Wesley Chapel is now sitting as the number 19, so they are the first team out, but there is actually a big separation in terms of the rating between Lake Gibson and Wesley Chapel, so Lake Gibson probably not sweating it too much right this second in terms of losing that number 8 spot for the playoffs. All right, 5A Region 3. Manatee still the number 1 spot, but see, here's the interesting thing. Pinellas Park falls to the 8th spot because, well, Manatee beat Pinellas Park last night, and, well, that dropped Pinellas Park 2 spots from the 6th to the 8th seed. Now, what's interesting here now is that we've got Immokalee, who was sitting there at number 9 but was the 8th seed. They actually bumped up 2 spots up to number 6, so it kind of situated and sorted some things out here, so... I'll pop this comment up in the moment here from Mark Cannon here, but as we go through it, there was a lot of shuffling here in this region this week as Cape Coral rose up 4 spots. So Cape Coral was in the next 2 out last week. Cape Coral is now a number 5 seed. North Fort Myers jumps up 2 spots after beating Fort Myers 33-30. So North Fort Myers now a spot ahead of Fort Myers. Fort Myers falling 2 spots. And you got Riverdale up a spot to the number 2 seed, and Charlotte falls 3 spots again. They lost to Cape Coral, so some big changes here in the region in Class 5A Region 3. And from Mark Cannon, he says Lake Gibson taking the win with the loss. If there was any way better state, that is well put, sir. Well put on how to state that one. Taking the win with the loss. That. I have to say that, taking the win with the loss. That is a really good way of putting it. All right. As we roll into Class 5A Region 4, how about this? St. Thomas Aquinas and Jeremiah Joseph thinks St. Thomas Aquinas is going to win 5A easily. Well, we'll see what happens. A lot of people have St. Thomas Aquinas pegged to win Class 5A, but, you still got defending state champions in Lakeland and Mainland sitting in this classification as well. So we'll see what happens. But if I were a betting man in this situation, I don't encourage betting in this in high school sports. But in this situation, my roll of the dice here would be St. Thomas versus Lakeland in a state championship game, and sure, that would be that would be a fun one to watch because anytime those two teams usually match up at a state championship, usually it ends up either very close or someone's going to dominate the other, which we have seen time and time again. But and Emery William Smith thinks I think Lakeland would say otherwise, and I agree with you. Lakeland would like to have Lakeland is on line 1, please. That's what Lakeland would say that to St. Thomas Aquinas right now. Probably we're on line 1. Let's get ready for the matchup. Yes, let's get ready for the matchup. Let me see if I can get that to go in here. Yes. So, all right. As we look at Region 4 here, St. Thomas Aquinas sitting there at that 1 spot. You've got Atlantic 2, so they did flip-flop spots here in terms of the seeds 1 and 2 here. Blanche Ely still holds at 3, but Miramar, one of the big movers, up 3 spots this week to number 4. And Mater Academy, they were outside the picture last week as the first 2 out. This week, they're sitting at a number 5 seed. So, again, anything can happen on any given Friday night that can shake up these rankings. And sure enough, it did in Class 5A Region 4. And you got Coconut Creek, who wasn't even in the picture last week. Well, this week, they are sitting there at number 8. Palm Bay Heritage and Hollywood Hills sitting in the 9th and 10th spots, respectively, and neither team were in those positions either last week. So, again, there's been some big movements there sitting there in Class 5A Region 4. All right, looking at Class 6A Region 1. How about Nice? Number 1 seed still this week in Nice. 2 overtime games in back-to-back weeks to St. Augustine and to Buchholz. Overtime victories. We will have Colin Drafts on from Nice tonight on the North Florida Blitz. So join us there for that. And we'll talk to Coach Drafts about that, but about the victories between St. Augustine and Buchholz and how the Nice Panthers are doing this season. Nice having a really great season, 5-0 so far. Oakleaf, one of the biggest movers this week, up 5 spots. So they were sitting there outside of the playoff picture last week as the first 2 teams out, and Oakleaf moves up to number 4 with a 4-2 record right now on the season. Mandarin 5, still no change there. Oviedo 6, still no change there. But Tate drops 3 spots after falling last week in their game to Navarre and to Coy Creek. A big, big win over Bartram Trail. Well, guess what? That got to Coy Creek sitting there now looking at the number 8 seed in Class 6A Region 1. And Bartram Trail is nowhere to be found in the top 10, ladies and gentlemen. So there you go. Not words I would expect to be saying, but Bartram Trail is nowhere to be found in the top 10 in terms of Class 6A Region 1. Fletcher and Evans, the next 2 teams out right now. And Fletcher, who was sitting at the number 7 seed last week, they dropped 2 spots now due to the loss. I think actually it was Oakley. Oakley did beat Fletcher. Yeah. So, all right. As we roll along here into Class 6A Region 2, we've got Armwood still sitting there at number 1. Okay, Plant number 6. Those 2, they're making up their game this coming week here on Thursday, which actually will be a game that will feature on the Pick 6 here on the Gulf Coast Blitz coming up at 7:30. But got Armwood still sitting there at the number 1 seed. No real big changes. Plant moves up a spot. Lake Mineola, who was nowhere to be found in the top 10 last week, they are now sitting there at the number 7 seed. And Melbourne falls 3 spots. So Melbourne sitting there in the next 2 out, not in the top 8 of the region. And, of course, Bloomingdale still sitting number 10 in the region. All right. So as we roll along here, we got Class 6A Region 3. We've got Wiregrass Ranch, who moved up 2 spots to number 1. The Bulls are 6-0. So Wiregrass Ranch doing what they are supposed to do, winning ball games and setting up for a big, huge showdown with Mitchell next week in week number 8 that will decide District 6A9. Palmetto falls a spot. West Boca Raton falls back a spot, but all those teams are undefeated. Mitchell undefeated as well, but holding steady at the number 4 seed. Leonard up a spot. They are 6-0. Yes, Leonard, who has struggled the last couple of years, but the Longhorns of Leonard High School, they are sitting there looking really good at 6-0. Parrish up a spot as well. Largo falls 2 spots, but Steinbrenner, a team that was not even near the rankings last week in terms of the top 10, they are now sitting there at that number 8 seed. Lakewood Ranch falls a spot, and Palm Harbor University now sitting there in the top 10. So Lakewood Ranch and Palm Harbor University are the first 2 teams out this week in 6A Region 3. 6A Region 4, Miami Southridge moves up a spot after beating Homestead. And yes, Miami Southridge, now the number 1 seed. Piper falls back a spot. Piper was off last week, but Piper falls back a spot to number 2. West Broward, Monarch, Nova, they all hold their spots at 4, 5, and 6, the 3, 4, 5, I should say. And Doral Academy, Homestead both flip a spot. So Doral Academy up to 6, Homestead now up to number 7. And Southwest Miami, who was the number 10 team, so they were in the next 2 out last week. Southwest Miami sitting there at a number 8 seed right this second. And it's been a hot minute since most people have heard from Southwest Miami. So the Southwest Miami Eagles sitting there looking at a playoff spot right this second here. All right, as we roll along, that is Class 6A. We're going into the largest classification now, Class 7A. And I'll give it a round of applause for that. We're now at 7A. All right, no changes sitting there at the number 1 seed compared to last week, with Sanford Seminoles still sitting there at number 1, but there's been some big movement here otherwise in the region. Lake Mary up 2 spots, Orange City University up 2 spots, Spruce Creek, who was sitting there outside looking in, they are up 3 spots. So District 7A2, all 4 of their teams are now potentially looking at playoff spots here, holding up the number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6 seeds. Hope I didn't say that too fast. But yes, Orange City University 3, DeLand 4, Flagler Palm Coast 6, and Spruce Creek. Flagler Palm Coast at 5, Spruce Creek at 6. Creekside up a spot, Winter Park down a spot. So right now, you got basically it's all the same teams that were in there last week, but no teams falling out. Just a lot of movement in terms of who is where right in this particular week. All right. Boone, Haggerty. Well, by the way, I should say this. Haggerty, which was in the mix for a playoff spot, they are now in the next 2 out. So again, Spruce Creek comes rolling in. Haggerty is out right this second, but we'll see. We've still got another 5 weeks of football left to go. All right, as we roll along in here, we're going to go into Class 7A Region 2. Ben is still holding that top spot. West Orange still number 2 seed, so the top 2 seeds don't change. But Newsom, a big mover this week, up 4 spots after beating previously undefeated Strawberry Crest. Strawberry Crest, who was a 3 seed last week, falls a spot after that loss to Newsom. Ocoee up 3 spots now from 8 to 5. And as we look at it, Ridge Community, nowhere to be found in the top 10. Nowhere to be found in the top 10 this past week. They are now in the top 10 as they are holding that number 6 seed. Apopka falls 3 spots after that loss to West Orange. Apopka will need an at-large berth now after losing to West Orange because right this second, it looks like West Orange is going to take the district title in 7A5 based upon the way how West Orange has been playing and the way Apopka has been playing lately. 2 total different teams than what we have seen in the last couple of years. Plant City, they were sitting there at number 10 in the ranking, so they were outside the potential playoff bracket last week. They are now sitting there at that number 8 seed. Earl Sumner falls 3 spots, and now they're sitting outside as the first team out. All right, Class 7A Region 3. Palm Beach Central moves up to the number 1 seed after beating Jupiter and handing Jupiter their first loss of the season. Dr. Phillips falls a spot to the number 2 seed. So there's going to be a battle between the 1 and 2 seeds. There's not very much separation between Palm Beach Central and Dr. Phillips, 16.522 to 16.145. Vero Beach up a spot after beating Fort Pierce Central. So Vero Beach and Fort Pierce Central basically effectively swapped spots. And after that, it is Toho, Lake Nona, Treasure Coast, all still holding these 6, 7, and 8 spots. Yes, Treasure Coast 0-5, sitting there at the number 8 seed. But the next 2 teams out, they were not even in the next 2 out last week, but that is East Ridge and Olympia. Those 2 teams, they are now sitting there in the next 2 out right now in Class 7A Region 3. All right. Class 7A Region 4, we've got Boca Raton still holding that number 1 spot, but Columbus was a big mover this past week, going from number 5 up to number 2. Columbus now sitting at the number 2 seed. All they need is a win this week against Miami High, who right now is sitting at the 7th seed. Beat Miami High, they're district champs, they're in the playoffs. So defending state champions right there in the Columbus Explorers. And then Santa Lucia's falls a spot. Goldman down a spot. Miami Palmetto up 3 spots. And then Forest Hill, who wasn't even the top 10 last week, they are now sitting there at the number 8 seed. Homestead, who wasn't even really in the mix for the rankings last week, but they're sitting there as the first team out in Class 7A Region 4 here. And with that said, that is a look at the playoff brackets here for this week as we go into week number 7 here. And if y'all got a question or a comment or anything to share, please let us know, and we'll do that here as we roll along and wrap up this show here. And it's definitely been fun looking at these brackets and these playoff rankings here as we get set for week 7. Of course, we got the Gulf Coast Blitz coming up at 7:30. Usually Gulf Coast Blitz airs on Monday nights at 8:30, but because of the South Florida, a lot of teams on the Gulf Coast playing last night, we flipped them with South Florida for tonight only. And of course, we have the North Florida Blitz coming up at 8:30 tonight right here on FloorHSFootball.com and the FloorHSFootball.com social media platforms. And all right, yes, Emery, thank you for saying that. Enjoying listening to you, Josh. Appreciate that. Thank you for watching. And Emery also had another comment here, and I'm going to pop that up. And he said, saw Venice give up 7 points to a winless Lehigh. First time they've given 40 points in the game. We'll talk about that on the Gulf Coast Blitz coming up here. And Jeremiah Joseph says, likely ain't beating STA teams. Pay attention to the back end of the St. Thomas Aquinas schedule. Well, we'll see. I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas does have a few opponents that are going to be really good, but we'll see how it rolls here coming up here over the next 5 weeks left of the 2024 regular season. It's hard to believe the regular season rolls by quicker than no tomorrow, but definitely appreciate everybody watching here on the Drive the State show. If you got any more questions, we got 2 more shows. Gulf Coast Blitz 7:30, North Florida Blitz 8:30. For myself, Joshua Wilson of FloodHSFootball.com, and everybody else here, definitely appreciate you watching the Drive the State show. We'll be back next week at 6 o'clock once again for another look at the playoff rankings from the Florida High School Athletic Association as we go into week number 8 next week. Stay tuned for the Gulf Coast Blitz coming up at 7:30. We'll see you then right here on FloodHSFootball.com and the FloodHSFootball.com social media networks.